this episode of UXD, where we will highlight one of the 3 common missed opportunities for apps to deliver delight to their users. This is the second episode in the 3 Steps to Awesome series. I'm your host, Nazmul Idris, a developer advocate passionate about design and mobile, and I have with me a very special guest on the show today.
Hey, thanks, Nazmul. I'm Patrick Larvey. I'm a researcher here at Google. I've been focusing on user experience and mobile for a long time.
Awesome. So apps that are widely divergent from platform guidelines are usually not a good idea. You should try and make people feel at home in your application by following platform guidelines wherever you can, and be consistent so that the user's expectations from that platform are met inside of your application. So for example, an Android user expects that the Android version of your application feels at home on Android. And similarly, an iOS user has the expectation that the iOS version of your application should feel at home on iOS. Keep in mind it's their phone. Like, users identify very deeply with a particular phone, and they think about it as their phone. They don't say that this is my Android or my iOS. They think of it as my phone. And so your application has to make sure that it fits inside of whatever idea they have of their particular phone, and not get hung up on these technical details around which platform the application is running on. Because again, the user doesn't care.
That's right, Nazmul.
So there are reasons for deviating from these guidelines, but you must have a good reason to deviate from them. Deviating without a particularly good reason is generally not a good idea.
That's exactly right. When people talk about their phones, they don't talk about my Apple 5 point whatever. They say this is my phone.
Exactly.
So, and I think the idea of making people feel at home begins with the kind of nomenclature we use when we develop apps. So, for example, what's the opposite of short?
Tall.
Not at Starbucks.
What?
At Starbucks, the opposite of short is 30.
Huh.
Another example for Android is making sure that buttons do what people expect them to do. A back button should take you
back.
Not necessarily. I've seen back buttons do all kinds of funny, unexpected things. Can take you out of the app, can take you back to the home screen, can do all kinds of things that people don't necessarily expect. So it's important to remember that design guidelines are not there just because people like guidelines. They're there because we want users to feel at home on their phones, no matter what app they're using. You can deviate with purpose, and there's some really good examples of this. For instance, in the latest version of the YouTube app, you'll notice that the YouTube app has gone to a card-based design, so you can scroll through all kinds of content. And when you find something you like, you can click on it, and the content can actually pop out, and you can watch the video in a much smaller square that you can move around your screen. Why did they do this? This is actually quite unusual. It's a very purposeful deviation. The reason they did this is so that you can continue to watch that video as you scroll through the content and find something else to watch. There are lots of instances where people say things like, I really want my app to reflect the quirkiness or the specificity of my brand. This is generally a bad idea. The way to express your brand is by having an awesome design that fits the guidelines of the platform and makes your user feel completely in charge. Here, as an example, I hope that everyone watching goes and checks out the Airbnb app. It's amazing. It will replace the desktop entirely for you, and you will be awed and inspired by how they've designed within the guidelines to come up with an app that's very, very unique to Airbnb and is, in my opinion, one of the best apps I've seen in a long time.
Exactly. I think the key here is respecting a user's choice, whether it's a choice of the device they've made or the platform, even the social network that they're using, for example, for social sign-in. I think the most important thing is that as a developer, when you're building an application that's going to live in a particular platform, make sure that your application does not feel like a second-class citizen, because the user will be able to know. Because users are savvy, they have really, really high expectations, and so it's really, really important to make sure that you respect their choice, and also make sure that your applications are giving a first-class experience for their particular platform on their particular device.
For example, Nazmul, if I invite you over to my house and I say, hey, I've got this great bottle of wine. Would you like to share it with me? And you say to me, hey, that's awesome. Where's a straw? Give me a straw. That's terrible.
Yes.
Why is that terrible? Because the entire point of inviting him over to share this bottle of wine is that we're going to drink it together. This is the point of playing well with others. Think of a mobile phone in exactly the same way. Your app is playing on that phone with lots of others at the same time. You need to remember that.
Exactly. No, and the key is that just like the bottle of wine, there's resources on your phone that are very limited, like CPU, network, and memory. And each application, instead of essentially sticking a straw and consuming all of CPU, network, and memory, they should really be in a more sharing state of mind. And so a good way to do this is to keep efficiency in mind. So one of the biggest things you can do as a developer is make sure that your applications are aware of battery consumption, network consumption, and display constraints. We talked about the Catterday app in part 1 of this series, and it was a Catterday app that allows you to get documentaries on cats on your mobile device. So one of the things you can do is that if the application detects that you're going low on battery, maybe instead of allowing you to play a particular video, it should allow you to queue it. Similarly, if you're not low on battery, but it senses that you're on a device that has a very, very small screen or a really low resolution display, instead of giving you the HD quality video that would consume a lot more battery and network, instead it should give you a lower resolution video that you can't even tell the difference when you're using this application. So similarly, another thing to keep in mind, and this is related to data transfers, is to try and use the big cookie model for transferring data. Big cookie model just means that instead of doing really small data transfers intermittently, you batch them together and do one big one. And there's a reason for this. The cellular radio on your phone, it actually drains battery at a rapid rate when you power the radio from idle to high power mode. And so if you can limit how often you do this, that will actually end up giving your user savings on their battery. And in line with that, you should also think before you sync, which is kind of tied to the same concept, where instead of kicking off your own syncing operations using your own timer, you should try and batch this with system syncs. What will happen is that the system will wake up the radio, take the hit for going from idle to high power mode, and then while it's powered up, all the applications that need data synced, it can do all of that at the same time, again, giving you more savings on battery. And finally, when you're testing and building these applications, make sure to use an old device that is resource constrained. Because if you're testing on the latest and greatest Nexus with multiple cores and many, many gigabytes of RAM, you might get away with things that you won't on an older device. And that's a really good practice to get into.
This also applies to your choice of technologies. So as your user's going along and using your app, and let's go back to the cat video app. It's time to watch a cat video, and suddenly you find that the technology requirements for watching that cat video are inconsistent with your platform. So how many times, and I'm thinking very specifically about Flash. Think about those iOS users out there. So that this is a planned incompatibility. And Nazmul's point was that you should plan for delight. That's absolutely true. You should also bear in mind that not everyone shares the same technology stack. There are other ways of thinking of that. So if you can use HTML5, for example, that might be a better choice.
Right. No, exactly. In this particular case, let's say you do have a valid reason to use Flash for a device where it's not going to run, then you should consider failing very gracefully, instead of just giving like a 404 message or a plugin not found or something that a user can't really understand. So one of the things to keep in mind is when you're choosing a technology stack, instead of using your familiarity as a developer with that stack, keep the user in mind when deciding which stack to use. Because again, you're building the application to live on your user's device, which is their device. So another related to this selection of technology stack is determining which version of a platform to use, like what APIs to use. So for example, on Android, you might think that based on market share statistics and so on, that if you want to deliver an application that reaches the largest number of users, then you're going to target a lower version API. So while that's not entirely the truth, because market stats don't show you everything. While that might be true, if you provide the lowest common denominator experience, then arguably the users of your application won't be that delighted. So what we're saying is that you can deliver delight while taking these constraints into account. So for example, if you take KitKat features into account, that is, build that into your application so that KitKat users of your application experience all the KitKat-ness, but at the same time Gingerbread users can also experience sort of the baseline capability of your application. That way you're delighting folks that have higher versions of Android on their phone, for example, while not really taking anything away from the, let's say, the folks that are on Gingerbread.
The signature of a really, really awesome app isn't the fact that problems never occur. It's the fact that that app handles those problems very, very elegantly. So before you release that app, imagine that no matter how awesome it is, and I'm sure it's awesome, you are going to have all kinds of problems. You're going to have error messages. You're going to have networks that go out. You're going to have batteries that run out. You're going to have people like me with big fat fingers that aren't very accurate on touchscreens. You're going to have bad lighting that, you know, those awesome graphics that you have, people may not see them in all lighting conditions. Plan for these things. Again, the signature of an awesome app isn't that problems don't occur, it's that a fantastic app will handle these problems very elegantly.
Exactly. I think on mobile, one of the most important things to keep in mind is that network coverage is spotty and bandwidth varies quite greatly. And so one of the key things to nail in a good mobile experience is to get offline mode right. Because if you don't take that into account, a lot of times you might have a UX fail, where somebody goes to use your application and it was working great with perfect network coverage, but they're in a particular part of town where your carrier doesn't have that great of a coverage and there's no Wi-Fi, and guess what? Your application just stops working. And that just leaves a bad taste in their mouth. So Gmail is a really good example of offline mode, where Gmail just hides the fact that you have or don't have network connectivity and allows you to compose emails. It allows you to manage your inbox and so on. And then as soon as you get connectivity, it just goes ahead and syncs everything with your Gmail. So one last thing is when you're creating meaningful error messages, I think it's really important to also give the user a path to resolution, so that they can recover from this error rather than just know or just notify them that something bad has happened. So I hope you enjoyed our episode. Stay tuned for the final episode in this 3-part series, which is coming soon. Just remember, by following these 3 steps, you too can avoid common pitfalls and make applications awesome. And also, if you haven't already, please join our UX community on Google+, where we curate information about all things related to UX. Thank you, Patrick, for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Nazmal, for having me.
Thanks for watching, and join us next time. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.